So I am Uncle Stu, and what I want to do is just first ask you, give me your name. Tell me a little bit about yourself, being that you're a father and a military vet.
Traditionally, I go by the monocle of the silent professional,
Okay.
but my real name is Demetrius Warren. I'm ex-Army, and I also work in the field of mental health. And right now, I currently work in the field of hospice, taking care of people and making sure that they pass away with dignity. So yeah, I have 2 biological kids, and then I got inherited other kids, which makes the total of 7, but they're all mine.
Are you married?
Yes,
How long you been married?
5 years.
Okay. How old are your kids?
Oh God, let's see, 21, 20, just turned 18, 16, 15, 12, and 14.
And how many is biologically yours?
2.
Okay, is that the 2 oldest?
Nope. Let's see, the 3rd oldest and the youngest.
In your experience coming in, now that you've got some fatherhood underneath you, what are some of the things that you wish you would have known prior to being a father now that you're here at this particular junction?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. You know, some of the things I wish I would have known, how to prepare yourself for the emotional connection between you and each of your children. Because the thing is, it's just like a lot of people think, okay, there's mom and dad, do what I say, but they never think about the relationship building aspect between you and your children individually and then as a group as a whole. Because I mean, I've found if you try to use a one-size-fits-all approach to each child, you're going to come up short every single time because you're not taking that time to do your due diligence to know that child, to know what their strengths, their weaknesses are, and to know how to take care of their needs individually.
You're absolutely right. Each individual child definitely needs their own individual parenting, their own individual understanding. And you're absolutely right. I agree with the fact of not being able to blanket, children up under one roof. With that being said, have you found in your discovery, in your practice of fatherhood, that regardless of how you parent, do you find that their identities are polar opposite, or do you find that they're kind of learning the same thing? In other words, do they see the trunk at the same time, or are they looking at different parts of the elephant and being able to identify different things?
Well, it's funny that you said that. To be honest with you, it's like throwing darts at a dartboard with a blindfold on. And what I mean by that is if you have kids that don't have the developmental sensitive points that they hit in their cognitive development, the elephant, some can't see the elephant, some know exactly what it is but ignore it. So with that being said, to answer your question, it just varies by degree. Now, eventually they're all on the same page because they understand the temperament of dad parenting with them. But in terms of them, they're their own individuals, and they can explain concepts. They can understand some of the concepts. But when it comes to really grasping and demonstrating and articulating that they understand that comes with time, and that has to be repetition and being able to see progress. But see, a lot of parents, in my opinion, they get caught up in what we call the 9-to-5 mentality.
Okay.
If they haven't freed themselves from, the system of working a 9-to-5 job, and they don't know how to do what we call self-development and just have self-discovery within themselves, they're never really going to truly see that progress. And, in my line of work, before I was in hospice, I worked in mental health. And with that being said, a lot of parents, they see their kids one way, but it doesn't actually match the reality of how their kid actually is, because they expect their kids to be little metronomes that mimic everything that they do and act like them. But in reality, they're their own individuals. And that is the hardest thing for parents to accept. I'm like, yeah, they have similarities to you, but are you actually taking that time to analyze and study and get to know your child to see what route they're taking in life? Because half the parents, they don't have a clue. It's always a shock to them whenever little Johnny does something that's out of character, but the signs were there altogether. It's just they were ignoring it because they get so caught up in the 9-to-5 work mentality to where they can't see those little nuances.
Let's go back, because you said a great deal. Let's go back to the 9-to-5 mentality. Help me with the understanding of the 9-to-5 mentality, because you have several types of parents. 9-to-5 is simplistic, But then what do you do with the parent that has to work 2 jobs? Parent that has to work second shift versus being there, say their morning might be trying to get rest so that they can go to a second shift job, which basically means that child is either not being parented by the time they get home, or their mental exhaustion is just there. They're just there. They're just surviving. Talk to me about the 2 different phenomenons of the 9-to-5 parent that we're going to say is probably working a middle class job versus, say, a poor parent who has to work 2 jobs to satisfy just the income of just trying to keep them alive.
Ooh, I like this question. I like this. Let's start with the 9-to-5 because I can talk to both because I've been both of those parents.
Okay.
But first, let me start with a little bit of a tale. When I first got introduced to parenting, I was in the United States Army. I was 19 years old. Me and my ex-wife, we weren't perfect. We had different views on how the world was. But the 9-to-5 is my job was my life. As you know, being a military man, everything that your family wants to do, like if the wife wants to advance and do stuff, it has to be based off of her dancing by the tune of the United States military and what you're trying to lead them into. So with that being said, life is like, okay, you as a parent, you're focusing on the next mission. And I'll use that as military mentality because the mission of the day, as we said in the Army. So you're thinking about getting your gear ready, getting yourself ready, studying for what you need to. And then the parenting aspect that is placed on the significant other based off of the time constraints. And I don't think it's something that is intentional, but the thing is everybody has a role and it's not necessarily gender that dictates it. It's he who wills the primary breadwinning aspects of things. That's the person that has to be the one that everybody else's schedule is adjusted to. And so with that being said, there are things that are missed, especially being a young parent at the time. So I had that element into the 9-to-5, being a younger parent. I didn't know anything about being a dad. I didn't know anything. I was raised by my grandparents and adopted by them, but my mom's always been in my life. But with that being said, I always knew how to maintain life as long as you had the resources to maintain it. I never knew what that was like to not have the resources until after I got out of the Army and I got divorced. So 9-to-5, you really don't have time for self-discovery. So when I talk about self-discovery, I use a model that is a psychology model called Maslow's pyramid of hierarchical needs. The bottom level is your basic needs, food, water, shelter. Then the second level of the pyramid is your safety. Third level is your esteem needs. And then fourth level, you're looking at love, belongingness. And then the top level of it is going to be self-actualization. Most people that are caught in a 9-to-5 mentality, their basic needs are getting met: food, water, shelter. The next thing is safety. That's always an issue. A lot of people don't go past the second level because food, water, shelter, safety. So the 9-to-5 locks you in there. Love and belongingness usually comes whenever you're more established in your life to where you're sure of yourself, you can kind of predict where things go. And then the last part, once you get up to the top of the pyramid to self-actualization, you can kind of predict the flow of life. You've had time to study, analyze yourself. What are your gifts or talents? What makes you tick? And what makes you able to function the way that you do? So that's the 9-to-5 right there. Now, let's talk about shift workers or poor parents. When you fall from glory and you don't realize that there's skills that you have to learn in order to get back there and supersede and go beyond, that's whenever real learning comes into play. Anybody can maintain as long as they have resources, but if they don't account for the problems that life brings, not having enough money to pay a bill, not having enough money to make rent, not having enough money to put food in your stomach, gas in your car, that becomes a real struggle. So when it comes to any form of self-development, yeah, they do things for fun, like smoke, maybe you're into video games, maybe you're into working out and stuff, but most people, they usually go the routes of drugs and alcohol to emotionally numb themselves as a form of socialization to get through what they need to get through. Now, I chose the route of the video games and working out and stuff like that just so that I could maintain money in my pocket. I actually didn't start drinking until probably my mid-20s, even though I've been in the military and all that good stuff. So whenever you really break it down and you think about it, it's a very difficult situation for most people to comprehend and fathom, because they never really think about, okay, what is the problem? What is the origin of the problem? And how do I solve the problem? Because most people are in survival mode, as you stated earlier before. Survival mode is key. And so when you're trying to survive out there, you know, my ex-wife, I'm not going to say her name, not going to badmouth her or anything like that. That's the mother of my child. But we didn't get along. And to this day, we still don't. But here's the thing, you know, I basically, because I was placed under the system of child support, I had to work, and I was getting a large majority of my paycheck taken up in child support due to a discrepancy on her end of it. But with that being said, I had to live out of my car. Sometimes I had to live with people, or sometimes I simply just didn't have a place to stay, and I still had to make sure I was able to be there to visit my oldest daughter and do all the things that I possibly could. And with that being said, it places an undue hardship on people. And you know, some men out there, they're out there making children, not taking accountability or responsibility. And that's a very difficult thing. But I went through that struggle, and then eventually I decided to turn to education, went through a couple of things after a few deployments in the military. And I was all over the place. I was wild and stuff, but it was survival mode. And to this day, there's still elements of me that's still in survival mode.
Let's go back, because I'm a military veteran. I too went through a divorce. I didn't have to go through child custody. I became a single parent. I understand some of the things that you went through. One of the benefits that we have in the military, now I don't know how close to a military base you are. I mean, our military VA hospital, but we do have 100% access to mental health.
I used to be one of the providers at the VA, so.
My question would now be somebody that does not have what we have, because there's a certain level of us coming out of the military where in theory we was trained to survive, which really means we thought we was living and not surviving, and that's only veterans understand that kind of terminology. But let's speak to those that are not from a military background. They do not have the discipline that we was given. They was not mentally cultured to survive versus live. What about the everyday person that doesn't have our background? What concept would you say, talk to the man and then talk to the woman?
Okay.
Male.
All right.
Speak for me. I had a mother and father. I grew up in a beautiful home. By the time I say I reached 30, 35, although my dad had passed away, I've seen a lot of places where it was one of those, I wish I knew, I wish I understood, because my father didn't teach me every single thing that I felt he could have taught me, but then at the same time, he could have just taught me what he knew.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I don't sit around here every day talking about my dad didn't do this. I just don't live in that mindset.
You just can't.
I just don't live in that mindset.
Right.
Now that I'm here, it's okay, what do I need to teach that next generation? Because there's a lot. So hopefully you can help me through those tools, that understanding of how do you talk to the male who is getting ready to either go into fatherhood, he's in fatherhood, and he may not understand what the woman is complaining about because he's getting foolish information online.
Right.
Well, I have to say there's a balance. I do see some of the arguments coming, and when I say women, I'm not even talking about online stuff, just in general, because I was a single parent. I was one that didn't get child support, so I had to do everything on my own. You know, I was the one that she would demand things, and it was like, I'm paying for everything. What are you talking about? You just have both sides of that water. So from your experience, taken away from the military, talk to that man about knowing what fatherhood is and how to go from that survival mode, woman, we'll just call it the argumentative mode, to having that self-actualization mode that you just spoke on.
let's start with the beginning process before we even
Okay.
get to fatherhood. A lot of men don't realize the most important decisions, there's going to be two in life: your career path and then who you choose as a partner.
Okay.
A lot of us men, we get caught up in the rhetoric, and is it okay to be a little vulgar?
You can.
Okay. So a lot of us men get caught up in the rhetoric about getting pussy.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, that creates credibility, accolades, and prestige amongst men that are inexperienced and immature about things. They get so caught up in being accepted as a man, but making a child doesn't make you a man. It just doesn't. Taking care of your child makes you a man. Now, how you are a man, that is up to you, because there's no definitive definition as to what a man should be. A man is just a gender or a sex. That's it. But it's about the individual that you become. So let's talk about it. Instead of sitting up there chasing skirts and feeding into what everybody thinks you should be feeding into, because if you've noticed, since I was a kid in the 80s, 90s, and on up, it was always about, okay, you get a job, you get a house, you get the dog, the 2 kids, and a white picket fence. But then whenever you have influence of men that are being taught by other men, okay, men can go out there, spread their seed, and do whatever they want, and not have any accountability. That's where problems come in. Rule number 1, young men: don't sit up there and feed into your peers trying to push you to do something that you feel you need to do in order to get credit from your peers. Because at the end of the day, you have a starting line whenever you really start to figure out who you are and what you want to be. Those same people that started with you are not going to be at the finish line whenever you get there. Number 2, you need to learn how to be selfish for yourself. You might have a whole bunch of friends that are out there partying, messing around with women, and doing all these things, but you need to invest in yourself, because nobody else will do it for you but you. Can't nobody take care of you better than you. Now, moving into fatherhood. It's a hard thing because we all make mistakes in life. Most mistakes, they're forgivable, and most mistakes can be corrected. Not all, but most of them can. Being accountable to yourself whenever you're a new parent and you say, okay, my life is no longer about myself, because it's not. It's no longer about you anymore. All the dreams and hopes, wishes, and aspirations that you had in your life, that's no longer about you, because you have another life that's dependent upon you, whether you wanted to make that life or you didn't want to make that life. So with that being said, you have to ask yourself, what can I do to give myself and my child the best life possible without the assistance of a significant other? The reason why I say that, and here's the reason why I say that. Everybody wants a significant other, but the truth be told, you don't need one to survive. You just need to be able to make enough income to live comfortably. You don't have to have the whole world to do it, but make enough income to live comfortably. You have to start learning how to befriend people other than your male cohorts, your male counterparts. So what I'm saying is, get some female friends with some experience. Ones that have your best interests at heart. Learn from them of what it takes, what they go through to raise a child. Because if you're a single parent, you're going to be going through those same struggles, but you're also going to be fighting through institutional oppressions and gender biases of a single male in a caregiving role. Men have a lot of things that they go through that women go through, but they don't get credit for it because of societal's indoctrination of believing that men are inferior caregivers in comparison to women, which is not accurate at all whatsoever. So you have to figure out where you want to go, what you want to do with your life, and the ability to give the best life to yourself and your child. And I say yourself first, because if you don't take care of you, then what makes you think that you can take care of a child? Now, the second thing that I'll go into, whenever you're choosing a partner, you have to know your worth and you have to have some self-respect. It's taken me many years to do that, but once I learned how to have self-respect and learning that I don't need to go out and screw every female that I see or that I'm attracted to, because just because you're attracted doesn't mean that you have compatibility with that female. You don't have compatibility with them just because you're attracted to them. It just means, okay, I can bump uglies for a few minutes, and then guess what? I might have created something, I might be satisfied for 15 seconds and then it's on the life again. That's the wrong mentality to have, because the most important choice besides your career path is who you choose to make a bed with. Does that person have your best interests at heart? Whether you have money, whether you don't have money, are they your best friend? Are they your confidant? And the thing is, in relationships, there's requirements and expectations. Much is required, much is expected. But here's the thing, as long as the requirements in the relationship, expectations are irrelevant, because the base foundation of the relationship, those requirements are met to stay in it. As long as the requirements are met, you can work through anything. But communication, openness, and being honest with who you are. Never sit up there and try to impress a female by telling her what she wants to hear. Be the unapologetic you that you are, and if she accepts you for that, then you don't have to make changes about who you are. Because when you get with somebody that tries to mold you and tries to shape you into something, you're gonna have regret, and then you're gonna be like, what did I do with myself? There is somebody out there for you, and you just have to learn that it takes time, it takes patience, it takes persistence, and it also takes strategy. A lot of people don't think that way.
Let's go back. You said something very, very good. You said attraction versus, trying to think of the other word.
Compatibility.
Give everybody a definition of the two, and then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question to that.
Sure. Attraction. There are different elements of attraction. You have physical attractiveness, and you have personality attractiveness, or you have asset attractiveness. Physical attractiveness. Somebody's physical features that is desirable to you. Personality. Well, everybody knows that there's people that they like to be around, people that they don't. So if they have a fun personality or a personality that meshes well with yours, there you go. Asset attractiveness. That is what's in your wallet. So we're talking about capital one, because every female wants to know what's in your wallet. And so with that being said, for those that aren't into females, and we'll go there for a second because this is a reality, well, guess what? You can have a male partner, you can have a female partner, or you can have a partner that doesn't necessarily fit the mold with things, but all the more the same. The problems are still going to be the problems, and you got to figure out how to navigate, and you got to have a blueprint to help you, because if you have nothing to compare to, then how are you going to navigate to figure out the problem solving process steps? Now, compatibility. When you think about compatibility, think about a puzzle piece. You have puzzles, and you have pieces that fit, and you have pieces that don't fit. Compatibility, you can kind of think about it in biblical terms, evenly yoked. A lot of people don't understand what evenly yoked means. Some people think, oh, they have to believe in the same religion that you do. You have to be into the same, hobbies, interests, and things. No, that's not it. Evenly yoked means you find a person that accepts you for the person that you are, they're compatible with you, and you guys are going to ebb and flow because you're going to play off of each other. So you're going to match strengths with weaknesses. Where you're strong, that person may be weak. Where they're strong, you may be weak. So you have balance, and compatibility means having balance. Just because you say I do doesn't mean that you're going to love that person every single day.
Right.
You may or you may not. Some days you do, some days you don't. But the thing is that makes you strong is if there's nothing in play that creates a deal breaker for you not to stay.
Tell me the difference between a woman who is trying to explain to you her difficulties with you versus a woman that's just asking way too much. Let me give you an example. I'm going to come from a single parent perspective, and I'm actually going to give you a real situation. When my daughter was in high school, now remind you, my daughter got her master's degree, so we're going way back now.
Amen.
I was living in North Carolina. Her biological mother is in New York. I was asked, send her to New York, bring her to New York. Now, remind you, I wasn't getting any child support. I couldn't get the mother to understand I don't have those financial means to me and her to get a plane ticket, go to New York, go get a hotel just for her to see her, as opposed to the mother, well, give me at least, if you want this, give me the ticket for her, pay for her half of her motel costs. Then maybe I'll come up with my half and get her to see you. That turned out to be an explosive argument. It's unfair, yada, 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 yada. Even to this day, still couldn't get the mother to understand it. However, I use that scenario because I have found women who would ask for reasonable things and men would get upset because they didn't have the child. So there was a conflict into understanding, was she being reasonable or unreasonable? Is her right or not right? So when it comes off, let's say to us as males, there's always some added stuff where it's like, no, I understand what she's saying, but most men don't communicate because, like you said, there's a lack of numbers of us that are single parents that understand certain things where other men don't. Mm-hmm. Let's have that conversation. How do you explain to men that maybe your baby's mother, because I hate baby mama, your baby's mother might have some legitimate arguments versus going to the low-hanging fruit and saying she just acting like whatever? Can you distinguish between the two?
Okay. Well, I'm going to go with what the courts would say in aspects of a child. They're always going to say, and I know you've been through this before, it's called what's in the best interest of the child. A lot of men think that, okay, I'm already paying child support, I shouldn't have to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z. Well, to a degree, they are correct. But the mothers, now this is a difficult thing, especially like regardless of how they got to the situation of not being together, there's always going to be that thing there to where they expect the man that they laid with to be a support to them, even though they don't understand that, hey, no longer does that man have to provide you certain things and you have to provide for yourself. And I think that's where the confusion comes along the way. So I'll use mine as an example as well. So it was traveling between here and Texas. I'm not going to say where here is just for, you know.
Fine.
So with that being said, my ex-wife, she used to expect me, if I wanted visitation with my daughter, to drive all the way from where I'm at down there, pick her up, and then bring her back. She didn't account gas money. She didn't account, you know, hotel fare and everything like that. And on top of that, I'm paying child support. So the support I could be using to go get my child, bring her back, and then keep that support in my pocket to take care of my child while she's with me, that still goes to her. With that being said, talking about like the hotel stay that you were talking about between North Carolina and New York, you know, the thing is, it's unreasonable whenever they factor themselves into the process. If it's about you and your child, then why are they factoring themselves into it? Yes, they are the mother, but truth be told, why do you need to come stay? It's simple as drop off my child. We'll set a date and a time to bring him or her back. And that's what it is. I am not your husband anymore. I'm not your significant other anymore. It is up to you. We made this child together. So with that being said, it goes back to what I was saying. You have to be able to take care of yourself and your child. So with that being said, if she's bringing your child to you, then she should be responsible for her own hotel stay, her own, gas fare, not for you to sit up there and pay for her trip, your child's trip, and yours. That's unreasonable. That's an unrealistic expectation. How do you detect these types of women? Because if I remember correctly,
I'll say both sides. You said something that was so good that even after this interview, we're going to do further research.
Of course.
The further research is, and I love what you say, what's in best interest of the child. And I think I will even say I've hit those gray areas. And what I mean by those gray areas is a lot of times, going through a divorce, we all get selfish.
Correct.
Subconsciously, we get selfish. And we get so selfish, we forget the child because we are individually in pain or hurt or whatever those emotions are, those frustrations are. And because of that, we get stuck in our own selfishness and we say child, but in actuality, it's us. I'm preaching now. I already see another video I got to do.
No, you're right. And I don't mean to interrupt, but you hit a nail on the head. Because the thing is when it's all fresh and you're not past that point that you don't care about who they're with, what they're doing, it's usually because we're hurt about something. Either we're the person that was the person that did the hurting, or they were the person that did the hurting, or it's a mutual thing on both sides. Now, realistically, logically, everybody has their faults on each side of it, because it doesn't just get that way just to get that way. So that's me taking accountability. I wasn't perfect. I don't feel I deserve some of the things that have happened to me, but life is what it is and you have to live it. So the thing is, you have to build up your strength, your self-esteem. Because when I was going through the divorce, all I could think about is what position the next person had somebody in, what they were doing. It was a visual thing, because the worst thing that a man or anybody can go through, but I'm going to speak from a man's perspective, is most men, they think about love as a physical thing before they develop emotional intelligence and they understand that it's more than just a physical aspect. The worst thing that you can experience is, one, you have the physical loss of that individual that you shared a bed with, you said that you loved, you claimed as your own and your one and only. But then when you get older and realize that you never had their mind to begin with, as in their mind wasn't in tune with your own, that's the most hurtful thing in the whole wide world. When you realize that beyond the physical stuff, your mind and their mind were not on the same page, which I'm talking about compatibility. I'm talking about being evenly yoked. You know, the key to a woman's heart is through her mind. And if you can't sit up there, build her up, make her feel like she can fly and do everything that she needs to be doing in the world, then guess what? The next person will. Or here's another thing. Maybe she just wasn't ready for that lifestyle yet, and you were, because sometimes you have two people that could be compatible, but it's just the timing, and they're at different mentalities in their life to where they're not going to meet halfway in the middle. They're always going to be one step ahead or one or three steps behind.
There's a part of I totally agree with you. Let me add a couple of factors that I have come to observe. First of all, because you being in the military, being a military spouse, being a spouse of a doctor, being a spouse of a lawyer, being a spouse of a high-end executive is totally different than being a wife of a 9-to-5er.
That's right.
And we don't have those conversations. I forgive women that divorce military men. I forgive women that divorce lawyers and doctors. Why do I have this compassion and forgiveness for them? Because those jobs require the male, and I'm just going to be sexist for a minute, requires the male to be out of the house longer than subconsciously I even think they realize. You're talking about, especially for us in the military, we don't have time to think about our family when we're on deployment. Correct. I know it's good for everybody to see this on TV where, hey, I'm down, let me call my mom, I don't think everybody understands this is survival, Persian Gulf. I need to survive, I'm trying to go home.
Right.
And then what they're dealing with in the homeland. Lawyer, I'm always in court, I'm always reading, so I'm already detached from family. High-end working executive trying to make that next move, you know, that athlete, there's no way in the world I could see families staying together under that. And I think, sadly, we have a generation where our divorce rates now is in the 70 percentile. I believe too many images is coming across the television that's giving the white picket fence image, but not really hitting the grind in the actual communication. Like you said, talking, communicating. What does that look like? What exactly are those conversations? I always will say, because it's a statistical fact, second marriages last longer than the first marriages now. Someone, why does the second marriage? Because you learn so much.
That's right.
Of the first. I don't think there's enough honesty being communicated amongst adults to help everyone else understand what did I mess up in my first marriage that I refuse to mess up in my second. But let me give you this, you know, and when I say you, meaning those people that's going through their first marriage, hey, let me give you all the mess ups so that you don't mess up. Let's really dig in and have those honest, hard rock conversations. If you right now going through the experiences you have, talk to that young woman right now. What does she not understand? Her not understanding men because she's surrounded by the single women with children, or she's surrounded by, I'm gonna be honest, the bitter women. Men ain't no good. They all cheat. Because it's all around us, whether it's on the internet, on national television. I love what you said earlier when you talked about the institutionalization of how women has been socialized that men cannot be good fathers, good caretakers. Stand on record. My daughter was honor roll mathematics and ended up getting an MBA and work at one of the largest banks in the United States of America. I think I did okay.
Oh yeah. You know,
for her, no children. You know what I'm saying? So, but we don't hear that narrative.
And you're not going to, because the thing is, at this point, it becomes gender roles and classification. You know, everybody has this thought process and it's a collective whole. And I can say this because I work in corporate America. I deal with everything that people deal with mental health wise. And the thing is, it's a mentality. It's a generational curse that is bestowed upon people, and they're not trying to figure out the steps. It's like, okay, because this was said, now this is what I have in concrete belief about something without further investigation. It's very easy for women and men to fall in this trap, but I'm going to speak on my experience with women. So I'm part Black, I'm part Japanese, but I grew up with the Black side of my family. And with that being said, the women, whenever men have had prior, transgressions of trespassing on something that women hold near and dear to them, it's almost like, well, you done messed up and World War III has started, and it's going to be a war of attrition trying to get back into the good graces. But then with that being said, what I've seen to the daughters, always bad mouthing men, always saying, certain things. So then the daughters have that mentality. But the question is that I have to the young women is, just because your mom's saying that's the truth, did you go through that with a man? Or is that just something that you're adopting because you feel like that's what you need to do to protect yourself? Instead of looking at a mindset of male and female, this is where I think a lot of people in humanity mess up, is they get fixated on male thought process versus female thought process. Now, I used to agree with male and female brain and all this other stuff, but then whenever I got my master's and started dealing with people, it's not necessarily a gender thing, because gender roles in society have shifted. It's not uncommon to see a woman doing a male's job, a male doing a female's job. It's just a thought process that goes along with it. So when you start learning how to communicate, because you can get 10 females in a room and you can ask them about the same thing. You got 4 that might say the same thing. You got 1 that's undecided about it. And then you got 5 of them that have totally different thought processes of how they understand and process information. So instead of making it a male and female thing, make it an individual thing and make it based off of the individual and their action. Ladies, you guys got to stop sitting up there saying that all men are bad, all men do this, do that, and the third, when you really need to understand that that time that you're spending with your girls, even though you say that you want to mate, you really need to take time and analyze and study men and study the type of mate that you want for yourself that matches your energy. And the same is said for men, because the first marriage, usually why it fails, is a couple of reasons. One, most people that get into this, and not all, so this is a generalized statement, and I'm not basing it off of statistics, it's just what I've seen in my life, is the first one is you get trapped. Oh shit, I just made I made a baby. What am I gonna do? So in my scenario, I said, I'm gonna get married and do the right thing under God, to be living right under God. Well, I will never do that again. Here's why. Because the circumstances and the parameters were not set in agreement with living under God's principles, because my heart wasn't in it in the way that I needed it to be in it. And what I mean by, I wanted to do the right thing because that was the social programming, the social engineering of my ex-wife, her family. My family didn't want me to get married, but I said, you know what? I want to be right under God. I want to do this right.
Right.
I wasn't ready for that because I wasn't there to take that commitment, that next step. I was just trying to do what I believed was right at the time. So now moving on to what I would do now. You know, if I was single.
Let me pause you right there. Let's go back.
Okay.
There's a reason why I want to pause you right there, because you said something and I want to dig into that.
Let's do it.
You said, I wanted to be right with God, but then you went real quick and said, but my family didn't want me married. You look back right now, because that's a pet peeve of mine. How much of your family was the influence of the destruction of your marriage? And I'll make a personal statement behind that. Go for it.
Woo! You know, I'm glad that you said that, because that is a very difficult thing to talk about, but I'm gonna go there because here's how it is.
If you want to talk about it, it's fine.
Oh, no.
Just hold that up. Let me explain. When I had my oldest daughter, because the daughter that graduated is my youngest, when I had my oldest daughter, I had her out of high school.
Right.
Let's just say that was a nightmare. Not my daughter and not my daughter's mother. But it was a nightmare because it became family versus family.
Right.
And because of that family versus family, even after, you know, I did one of your numbers, hey, let's make it right. I didn't have my youngest, let's make it right. I would always tell people, in spite of everything that happened in my marriage, and I can talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, that marriage was doomed to fail because of outside issues.
Right.
When we separated, 6 months after we separated, we both, what I call, made amends. We both admitted what we did wrong in the marriage. You go your way, I go mine. She remarried, I remarried. But deep down inside, that marriage was doomed to fail because the family was ridiculous. And that's on both sides. You know, my parents was definitely overprotective of me and vice versa. And, you know, again, without going into details of stories, I think that's a conversation that's never been had. My middle child, when she got married, first thing I told her, whatever you going through in your marriage, do not tell your sisters, your mother, Deidre, don't tell me, because I'm already going to be prejudiced.
Absolutely.
So don't find outside help if y'all got inside problems.
Well, you know what, to piggyback off of that, you know, you're 100% right. My family, I have to say, for the most part, had my best interest at heart, because they saw some things that I didn't see because I was in that blinded honeymoon phase, puppy dog love, and nothing was going to stop me from doing what I needed to do. So my own folly was not taking into account what they were saying, but I wasn't at a place emotionally, mentally, and age-wise with experience to understand the wisdom that they were imparting on me. My ex-wife's family, they had my best interest at heart, believe it or not. And to this day, I still love them to death, even though we don't talk or anything like that. But they told me that my ex-wife wasn't ready to be married, and I blatantly disregarded that because they knew how she was, her mentality, and all that other good stuff. Now, like I said, I'm not here to harp on her, because the thing is, it was my fault that I didn't listen to the warning signs. Sometimes being young can be your greatest fault, because when you don't have the experience to know, okay, when a man leaves his family and a woman leaves her family to become one, you have to deal with things internally and not worry about what other people think. But before I was married, I had two, you know, get out of jail free cards, and I overlooked them because I was so blinded by the emotion of what I thought was love at that point in time.
That's right. And I think that biblical statement, when you talk about, it says, as a man leaves a mother and father and cleaves to a woman, then he becomes a man. But we got to remember that's Genesis. That's not the rest of the book.
Right.
So emphasize the rest of the book. I would say, looking back, it's wisdom that a lot of us do not listen to. And I hope that in that revelation that you just spoke of, that should be your ultimate healing. And what ultimate healing? You may not like what happened in the marriage. You may not like happened outside of the marriage, meaning, coming into the divorce and out of it. But it should bring you healing, because now you can say, you know what? It really wasn't her fault. In theory, it really wasn't mine. There is no fault. Now, this is going to sound so hypocritical. There is no fault because there was sin on both sides.
Absolutely.
And because of that wisdom, I don't have to like the punishment or the consequences, but this is my consequence for not listening to the wisdom that was imparted in me. Like I said before, you went into the military. Women don't understand being a military wife. That's why we got Joni letters.
Right. Got Jody and Joni.
Right. We didn't listen to the drill sergeant that said, look, when y'all get out of AIT, leave these types of women alone. Mm-hmm. And guess what? Some didn't listen. And they suffered. So in that, I think that should be a comfort for you, or at least the first step of saying, you know what, maybe this is the part that I can finally let go, because I had to admit something that I didn't want to admit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Instead of in a bitter way, because women say it too, but in the bitter way, I shouldn't have married her, as opposed to saying, you know what, I'm not really blaming my mom and dad. I'm not really blaming them, but I had the signs of not doing this. I could have raised my child. I could have sent a check. I could have did other things outside of this. Therefore, only thing they did was prove what needs to be proved. There's a difference, and it goes into a whole different topic. I always said, even with my wife, when I started dating her, the biggest issue I said to her, if people that you introduced me to, meaning the males in her family, because I was vetted very hard, the male, if any one of them detects that I'm not right for you, I don't care how you feel, listen to what they got to say. Don't listen to me, listen to them. Because they might be detecting something because they know you. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Not know me, they know you. So there might be something that another woman may tolerate, they know you won't tolerate.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So
no, I understand.
I was able to be vetted that direction, and vice versa. My daughters was able to vet her, but they knew their dad. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So they knew what their dad needed. They knew what the type of woman their dad had to have. What type of woman needed to be with their dad. The key for them was, forget the mother, the divorced mother. It was, are you a woman that's going to love my dad? Not for what he got materially. Do you love him, the individual,
right.
etc. Which they was able to see. So in that regards, that's the conversation that's not being had enough.
Right.
It's external family. Sometimes we can confuse it and say, my mom is just this, my dad is just this, and yada, yada, yada. Yeah, it is possible to get bad advice when you got, and I'm going to be sexist for the moment, 6 women, all divorced, they hate me, and they see your man, hey, no man is good. Okay, that's a whole different scenario in its own right, versus a healthy family saying XYZ. I'm also very sensitive, and that's going to throw off the topic, but just to kind of put it out there, I'm also very sensitive of the church doing the vetting too, especially within the African American church. I'm just going to be honest. There's too much sick pastoral stuff going on.
Absolutely.
And that's a whole nother manipulation. I'll be glad to speak on that on another time, but
absolutely.
That out there because I think it needs to be discussed. With that being said, now I'm going to go and I'm going to let you continue with your thought on the rest of your conversation. I just wanted to hit that little nugget about reflecting on the family.
Absolutely. And I mean, part of me is just like, I hope my ex-wife never sees this because I usually, like I said, I keep myself under my monocle and whatnot. But here's what I'm going to say.
But you haven't said anything bad about her.
Never will.
And I have a second channel. There is nothing on that channel where everybody can say, oh, we know her. You said all this evil stuff. I never talk evil about her.
Oh, no, I'm not worried about that. That's a me issue that I got to deal with, and that's being honest. So, with that being said, some people think their divorces are like the worst experiences in their whole world. Not me, because my divorce gave me a second chance at life and self-discovery. Now, I respect the fact that my ex-wife had to go through undue hardships with raising my daughter, but I will say this. She had the opportunity for me to be an active participant, which I've never given up, never stopped fighting for my daughter and whatnot. So that was her choice to create that distance and space. But I will put it to you this way. Child support was paid, even though there were rough times where maybe not all of it at some time was paid, but something was given. And, the thing is, the fact that it was given, you talked about when there were unrealistic demands of what is enough, what's unrealistic, and, just unbelievable. Well, my ex-wife was supposed to be still, even though we were divorced, still supposed to be somewhat of a confidant. We may not have worked out, but I was hoping that we could have a friendship and I could tell her things. Well, when I tried to tell her certain things backfired in my face. And the next thing you know, there's an increase with child support. So, now that's the thing, you have to be very careful who you confide in and you place your faith in. And one thing that I'll tell the men out there, you have to remember your ex is an ex for a reason. So be guarded about the information that you put out there because that's your life. But back to my point about this was the greatest opportunity. Because of that, I got to date other people. I got to experience different things. I got to focus on myself. And when I had free time, I was able to cultivate and become something that I didn't even know that I wanted or needed to become. And because of that, like I said, the 9-to-5 mentality, I was able to break the shackles because I had to live with my grandmother for a while, who's also my mother by law. So I had to do all of those things to where I could focus on myself and understand what it took to be the man that I want to be for myself. And right now, do I know where I'm going? No. Is the career path that I chose for myself, is that the final destination? I don't know. But I do know this. The pursuit of happiness is a real thing, but some people don't understand the key word in that phrase is pursuit. Just because you're pursuing it doesn't mean that you're going to make it there. Doesn't mean that you're going to find your happiness. And a lot of people, they lose sight of once you've obtained what you needed to obtain, are you going to be content with being there and becoming complacent or stagnant? Or are you going to set new goals for yourself? Because a lot of people, they don't know what to do with themselves in boredom because they've already pursued everything and they're not finding new meaning or new value. And a lot of people don't invest in themselves. And that's hard to do. So
talk to the man right now about that self-discovery, about that understanding of self-discovery. I agree with you. I've had to go through the same process of that self-discovery, going through that same process of relearning things, that self-discovery of, hey, I got new skills and talents that I didn't recognize before. Example, I've always wanted to own my own business. So that's always been a dream, but never would I've seen myself as being someone in a production company, trying to run a production company, doing what I'm doing now. Now, I've always communicated with people, always been in the education sector, but doing what I love doing now, which is communicating and interviewing people and talking to people about various things in their life. So this is where my love is. I can do this all day. But it was a self-discovery. Because if you would have said I was going to do this 10 years ago, I would have said no. 20 years ago, definitely no. So talk to other men about that second life.
Yeah. You know what? It's my pleasure to do so, because, you know, a lot of men after a divorce, they don't realize that there was a lot of training that happened on both ends. But let's talk about the men's side of things. Men get trained to know what their spouse want to eat. They get trained to know what schedules their spouses have, the kids have, certain mentalities of things that you have to have in order to survive, and you have to be in sync with your partner. But once that all goes away, whether it's chaos, destruction, or you just say, hey, we're better off not with each other, now you've been conditioned to think and act a certain way. And that conditioning, 9 times out of 10, isn't the conditioning that you wanted for yourself. You just got into a routine, you got into a habit, and then you don't know yourself anymore. And so I can speak on that because I'm a war-torn veteran that's been on multiple deployments. I got post-traumatic stress disorder, so that's another battle within itself. Waking up, opening my eyes to see the next day, that's a struggle within itself. I'm also a disabled veteran. May not look it, but I am. You have physical scars and you have the hidden scars. So with that being said, I didn't even know how to tie my shoe. I didn't even know if I wanted chicken or if I wanted steak. I didn't know if I wanted to go out. I didn't know if I wanted to stay home, because there's that everlasting caving darkness of depression that you see, and you have a little pinhole of light that you're looking up, and you're just like, what do I do now? Because your whole purpose of what you believed your calling and your purpose was is no longer there. So now you have to believe in yourself. But how do you do that? Because you're broken. What I started doing when I was younger and foolish is I'd try to find comfort of other women. I became the biggest ladies man that I could possibly be, but I had one code. I would never sit up there and get into a relationship with somebody, and I would let them know, hey, I'm out there messing around with other women, and if you want to mess with me, you can mess with me, but don't expect too much. And that's how I kept most of the windows from being busted out in my car and stuff, and not being looked at as a player, because I kept it 100. And so in that, I found that, yeah, the physical thrill of an orgasm, yeah, that was great because it released those bonding hormones of oxytocin. But then after that, it was the cuddling and the, being close to somebody for a little bit was good. And then I would push them away because I wasn't ready to have somebody in my space again like that. So then from there, going back to the hobbies that I was able to maintain while I was in the relationship, the only hobby that I was able to maintain was video games and anime. And I was ridiculed for liking those types of things. I was persecuted. And I was also told nobody was ever going to love me again because, I'm not a man. But in my mind, I kept on saying, well, who is that person to tell me that I'm not a man? I was born with 2 balls and a shaft. So, by textbook definition, I'm a man. It's just more of figuring out what kind of human being I want to become. So then through PTSD, I used to work down south in Texas, and I worked for the post office, and they were doing layoffs in 2010. I got laid off, and my grandfather took ill. So after he took ill, 2 weeks later, I was back home, and then he passed away. That's when the real struggle came. And with that being said, my grandma was having a bunch of unrealistic demands on me as if I were her husband. So, she had a husband-son mentality, which is something that we'll get into later, I'm pretty sure. But with that
husband stuff.
So with that being said, I'm reminding my grandmother, I said that I'm not Ernest Warren. I'm me. But I will help you, but you can't expect me to fill the void of where your husband is no longer there. So after that, I went to therapy for PTSD at one of the VA facilities. It was a phenomenal facility. It's in Des Moines, Iowa, and they had domiciliary. And I was angry. I didn't believe in any of the therapy and everything. I slept most of the time, but I have a special trait to where I can be comatose sleep, but still hear the conversations and process information at that time due to my military training. But one of the social workers, she pulled me off to the side one day and she said, "You're out of control." She's like, "How are you going to pull this together? Because you only got X amount of days before you're going to go back home." And I broke down and I told her everything about what I was dealing with my grandmother, my family, and everything like that. And she put it into perspective. She's like, "When you left home, you were 18. She's like, "Now you're in your mid-20s and grandma is not as young as she used to be. And grandma might need a little bit of help. And so it's up to you to do the best that you can to help her." And when she said those simple words, I teared up, I broke down, and I said, "Oh shit. I didn't even factor in age and things are changing and her physical ability because I was so focused on myself and my pain and hurt that I wasn't able to respond to others."
Mm-hmm.
So after that, I chose the path of education. And the path of education wasn't to become what I am now. The path of education was to better understand myself from an academia standpoint so that I could have something compare and contrast and to figure out what I did or did not want for myself. And through that, people have told me that they find solace in talking to me. And I said, well, I might as well make a career out of this and figure out how to generate income.
Well, let me let you know that you're not crazy. Let me let you know that you're not isolated or alone. I have the similar story. After I divorced, dated someone that it didn't work out, ended up leaving North Carolina, coming to Virginia by way of the VA hospital because I too understand that, hey, this was my purpose. Now my daughter is graduating undergrad. I lost my purpose and I lost myself in my purpose. I kind of knew it was coming because I had this spiritual thing that happened where it's like, hey, find your purpose. It's like, what are you talking about? And so I get it in the sense of, you're socially conditioned that your purpose is in being a husband, or that social conditioning of, I'm a father. And now all of a sudden those two things separate, those two things fall apart, or however it happens, and you lose your identity. Mm-hmm. Go back to the first part. That's why I wanted to focus on the Genesis part. When we talk about that cleaving to Eve, a lot of times we don't understand the struggle of cleaving to your purpose. Eve was Adam's purpose, but many other men, such as you and I, we get married to different purposes in life. And when that purpose is no longer there, we die with that purpose and not really realize how to find new purpose. So I get it.
Right.
I was in the domiciliary. That's what led me to Virginia. And that was my getaway. Mm-hmm. I too, once I got out and got my own place, I too was in the same position. Before my wife, hey, I found comfort in a woman. But like you, I was totally honest. I'm not ready for the relationship because I was learning, at least for me, I was learning how to enjoy being alone, which was something I never had a real opportunity to do. Mm-hmm. And when I be alone, it was alone in my peace, not alone in loneliness, but that first thing of, wow, I'm in my place and I don't have to do certain things. I don't have to get up at 8 o'clock every morning. I don't have to go to a job. Just that not having to do was starting to bring that peace. Mm-hmm. That's where I learned either you love me as I am in my totality, but I don't have to do certain things to receive other things. So like you mentioned, anime, and they say, oh, well, that's going to go into another subject, but I'll go there.
That's all right.
You mean to be black. because being black means I got to be from the hood, then I'm just not black. Black means I got to be a thug, then I guess I'm not black. Because my love for me is, now before I went and got all this computer and, thank my homeboy for this lovely computer that I got now. But before YouTube, I used to just watch TikTok.
Right.
It's entertainment. But I also love my PlayStation. Doesn't mean I'm a child. No, it was my getaway mental entertainment.
Your escapism.
Right. I love going to the beach. I just enjoy it. Don't mean I was going in the water. I just like the ambiance.
The atmosphere.
Discovering things that I started to love and really appreciate without me, which would be a polar opposite, culturally speaking, that most people was engaged with. But luckily for me, I didn't have that experience with women saying, hey, you're not this or that. But I think that discovery of get out of that box and really see the world. What do you really love? Why do you love it? And it's not having to check off all the whys, but it's, hey, this brings me peace. And if I know I can have that 1-2 hours of peace just doing whatever, then I can give you whatever you need,
Right.
But if I can't get that, then no, you don't belong here.
Right.
Knowing how my finances are together. No, I'm not taking you to $100 meal when I'm not out there buying me $100 meal.
Right.
Then that's not your lifestyle. You just some chick that want a free $100 meal. I don't have to. I also had to learn I don't need a woman.
And you got to learn boundaries.
Right.
You got to learn how to love yourself. Self-discovery is learning how to love yourself and being alone with yourself.
Exactly.
It resonates with me what you're saying, because I know that you as my senior have been everywhere where I've walked, and I know I can learn a lot from what you're saying. And the thing is, it's just like the type of women, like, here's another thing that I'm going to give to the young men out there. You have to learn the type of women that are attracted to you. Mm-hmm. And so there's 2 ways to go about this to try to get your life right. Each iteration of that same woman, make sure they're better than the last one, which that's one way of going about it. Because if you have your type, you can't choose who you fall in love with or what you're attracted to, because you're going to go there by default. Right. Or find somebody that is opposite. And what I mean by opposite, they don't do the same things, but y'all can communicate and still find joy with each other. Because that's what happened with my current significant other. She's totally opposite of everything that I had, but she had beauty to her. And the funny thing is, when I met her, I didn't even realize that, or didn't know if I was attracted to her or not, because she came at me in a different way. She didn't come at me for what was in my pants. She didn't come at me for what was in my wallet, and she didn't come at me for my looks. She talked to me as a human being. And the first conversation, and I'll share a small part of this story, but she was a former dancer, and I met her when she was dancing. And she looked at me and she said, "Can I talk to you for a second?" And I said, "Sure." She's like, "Can I tell you something without you getting offended?" And I said, "Sure." She's like, "I think you're gorgeous." And I said, "Now, why would that offend me?" Then from there, even though I was in a place where ladies of the night do what ladies of the night do, she talked to me about God. Devil was trying to work so hard that night to cause chaos in a place where you would never expect it. But whenever you look at what Jesus used to do, he'd go to the worst part of towns and start, giving aid to those in need. Right. So with that being said, a lot of the females in there thought that she was talking smack to him, thought that we were talking smack about him, but really she was talking to me about, hey, this young lady's having a rough time. You might want to throw a little something her way, something to give her a little blessing. It may not be much, but just something. Right. It's so easy for people to misconstrue a situation based off of what they see, not what they hear. And a lot of people are afraid to ask questions to understand what's going on. Right. And so it's a very delicate dance in life. So again, what I say to men and to women, know what you're attracted to and try to find better versions of that, or find something opposite, because most of the time you're going after what you've been conditioned to go after. And the thing is, when I say go after, I don't mean chase. It means Get to know that person, befriend them before you even think about getting physical, getting intimate. Get to know them, because a lot of us, I'm guilty. I raise my hand right now. That when I saw a beautiful woman, the first thing that I was thinking about, and I'm going to be a little graphic, but clapping those cheeks. I'm like, how good do those cheeks feel? And if it was really good, then I wanted to be with her. Instead of getting to know what is her likes, what's her dislikes, what's her background, what's her lineage, what's their heritage,
Right.
what does her family do? Is her family accepting? Because in my lifetime, it's always been anything but women that look like me that are attracted to me. And with that being said, that's fine. But then you have to figure out, is it something that can work? But eventually I got to a point in my life to where I said, all right, I'm not worried about what her family wants or expects out of me. All I care about is, am I enough for her? And I'm going to let her work out the details with her family, because that's her family. A young lad that I'm mentoring right now, he worries so much about his family's thought process, her family's thought processes. And I said, you've already stepped outside of both of those families and you guys are making your own. You have to come up with your normacy, your baseline of how to function.
Mm-hmm.
If you're so concerned about what other people think and want of you, you are never going to maximize your potential to be the best version of yourself that you could be, because you're focused on what others want versus what you want for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let me ask you, is there any questions you have of me?
Yeah. So, were you married while you were in the military?
No.
Okay.
I didn't get married till after the military. I went in the military because I had a child.
Gotcha.
So that was my motivation. You don't see the picture now because I had the picture up there. My dad was Air Force, I was Army.
Now me and you got a link there now.
So I went into the military because of my daughter, my first child. I went in because I was making decent money, but not real money. Mm-hmm. So I went in to be a support for her. Went into the military, and her mother ended up having another child while I was in the military. I was sending money to my dad to give to her father, meaning my baby's mother's father, and he never told anybody I was sending child support home.
Oh, wow.
It kept a lot of conflict, and no one knew that I was sending money, home. And I knew it was getting to him.
Mm-hmm.
He kept it secret. So it made me look like the absentee father. So that's a story within itself. And a lot of the issues that happened, it affected everything all the way up until adulthood, even up to now. Now, me and my oldest daughter talk all the time. It ain't that real relationship like I have with my two youngest.
Absolutely. And the funny thing that you said that, I'm like pretty much in that position right now, because I had fought many court cases for my oldest daughter. And, I'll just say the thought process that was instilled in her didn't sway in my favor. And so now I'm dealing with, if and when that conversation comes, what kind of relationship can be built from there. And I'm still making my peace with it right now. And just, I'm not going to push. I'm just going to let her come whenever she's ready to come, because, in my line of work, I talk with people all the time and I see what happens whenever they push for certain things. You just kind of have to let people go their own way, and it'll eventually come. I have faith in that it'll eventually come. I don't know, but something tells me I have faith in that.
There is, I'm not going to say this for you, but there is a conversation, a reality that a lot of women and a lot of children, adult children, don't want to hear. But I understand on an intimate level. There are some men that are just going to have to live their second life and live in peace.
Correct.
Okay. I can give you people who want to talk about actors. I can give you plenty of them. And the children may not understand, the mothers may not understand. But whoever listens to this, there's a conversation that needs to be had. And there are fathers who, I would say, you may have to love your child at a distance and go live your life. You cannot mend what you didn't break. When I think about, and I've never did the deep dive study, But when the Williams sisters and their father, now, yeah, he was the stepfather, and now the daughters is coming up late in the life and saying what they're saying. For many fathers, or for some fathers, you might be a better second father than you was a first father.
Oh, you hitting the nail on the head.
And you're a better second father, either A, because of what you learned, or B, because you went through hell with the first one. So if anybody want to give Bible, I can give Bible. Jacob was a horrible father to the first 10, but he became the best father to the one. And that one ended up being the second highest ranking man in Egypt. So you can sit here and say what's right, what's wrong, but again, my voice is always going to advocate. You're probably a second best father than you was the first.
I can't refute that, and I agree with that, because you know what, I think, some guys, they're blessed to where they stick with their kids, and maybe they don't have the most stellar relationship with their significant others, but they stick it through and they fathered their child, and they fumbled their way through to getting to a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I didn't know what I was doing in the beginning. And, I tried to model, I tried to mimic everything that I possibly could. But see, the biggest mistake that I made was I lived my life based off of somebody else's expectations of me, instead of just doing what I felt was right for me in that time. And at that point, I didn't have the resources to do what I wanted to do in the time. When you're in the military, everybody thinks, oh yeah, you getting money. Nah, you ain't getting money, because at one point in time, I was on food stamps in the military, and I'm not ashamed to admit that, because rough times come, they come. When you're young, you have money, you don't know what you're doing with it, you don't know how to manage it properly, whether it's you or your significant other, you're going to go through some trials and tribulations until you can get it right. You're going to go through that.
Let me say this. Even right now, my youngest daughter is 28. You still don't have any resources or knowledge or information out there. That's one of the reasons why I started the platform. You don't have the political will for that type of knowledge, information, and resources. When I say you'll be a second best father, I understand what you're saying, but here's what I'll tell women. What kind of environment did you create? What is the environment you created that is also the causation of what is happening? Because if I cause a house to be burnt and he refuses to come into my burnt house, and then he goes somewhere where the house is not burnt, it has flowers and green grass and it looks beautiful, and that particular individual, that particular woman gives him the peace, the love, the comfort, and children see his good works, can you really condemn him? Or do you need to look in the mirror at you? Kirk Franklin has always said this, and I had a son. When I had this son, it was, wrong position, wrong time, etc. Grows up, he becomes this, awesome musician, record producer, makes all this money. I don't know the real relationship. The son taught to be the way he was. Now, here's the irony. I look at him, and I'm hoping I'm quoting this particular singer correctly. I look at, was it Left Eye? One of the girls in TLC never knew her father until she was famous. Went and sought her father. Come to find out she got brothers and sisters. Father got a whole new life. So I'm looking at two people who could have easily taken on the attitude, F my dad, but they had a different mentality. When I worked in the high school, I used to tell kids all the time that would tell me, oh, my dad left when I was 3 years old. How you know that? Oh, yeah, he left. And I'm going, I can't even remember what the heck I did at 3 years old.
Right.
Taught to you.
Right.
I always tell them, when you get 18, go find your father. Go find your father. Well, one girl actually went and did what I suggested. Told me that was the best thing in her life, because she got to not only find her father, but I told her, when you find him, he's probably not going to tell you what happened and why he left, because we have a tendency just to say, well, I was a bad guy, and we take the evil on. Enjoy the man and where he's at right now and what y'all can build right here, right now. 2 years after she graduated, told me it was the best thing she ever did. But she had to peel away all of the garbage that she was told about her dad that she recognized wasn't true. She was able to get a broader story. You see what I'm saying? So what I would say to you is you're probably the second best man, but you're still the same person. You just wasn't in the right environment.
Mm-hmm. And that's funny that you said that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so be free to live in the peace. So if your daughter comes back and willing to accept who you are now versus what she was taught you are or was, it's not your fault. And if I can give any man that, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you're ignorant. It's not your fault. You learn. And if someone's not willing to accept who you are in your now, it's still not your fault. Don't live, and I'm talking to myself even in the mirror. Live for your past. Don't live because you'll spend the next 20 years trying to mend something, and children, even in their adulthood, has a way of manipulating you and make you live in guilt when you've already started to live in peace. That's another subject. But children, even in adulthood, will make you live in guilt instead of living in your peace. They'll make you live in your past and never see you for your future. So how do they do that? Oh, well, I can't get this amount of money. Do you remember? And now you're living in your guilt. Now you're living in depression. You're living in anxiety. You're living in emotions you have no business living in. And so when I say you might have to become the person to be at peace to say, you know what? I guess our relationship can't be mended. When Kirk Franklin went off on his son, and I looked at all the internet, not one person, because I understood what that was. Number one, that was a setup. Number two, Kirk Franklin got to that point where he was sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Right.
Just as a woman knows your emotions and know how to get you angry, so does your children. So, yes, I want nothing but the best for you and your child. I wish I could give you the Disneyland story and say, she'll come back and y'all just be in happy bliss. But I also have to speak the reality.
Absolutely.
If she's not in a place where she was taught to love and respect you, and she had 18 years to hate you and be told stuff about you that she's not open-minded to see if it's the truth, you almost have to be at peace and say, hey, if you don't want to love me, gotcha. You go your way, I go mine. If you want to call me the bad human being for the rest, okay. I have to be at peace with that. That's the hardest thing to say, but I hope so many people get that. I would say that to children. I'll give you another example. I probably got to find it online. Ivana Van Sant did a show, well, she did many, but this one show hits me the hardest. And the show that she did was when a father came back into the life and the mother had lied and said he did perverted things to the children. The children believed their father did this perverted thing, and come to find out it was a lie. And everybody had to live under this lie for over 30 years. This man couldn't see his kids because of the lie. And when the truth came out, the mother basically had no emotional remorse. But think of the damage this had already done. Done to his daughters, done to him. So, and then you get a petty, I'm sorry.
Right.
How did those girls have to grow up thinking and probably repeating to others, my dad did this to me? How did they feel about their own mind, their own body, their own this? So I use that as a live example or a living example to say, be at peace. Even I, at 56, still struggle. So don't just gonna go away. I still struggle. So there's always that compassion in my heart when men say, I'm gonna see my child for the first time and it's been 20 years, or I wanna see my child and I wanna have this life with my child and this and that. I always have to give them the other side of the reality. I also hope that women who are hearing this recognize, you want to be bitter, you know, I'll add this. I'll hear a lot of women say, well, I don't teach my daughter hate. I don't teach my daughter hate. I don't teach my son to hate their father. I don't teach them this. You may not be teaching it, but who in your family is teaching it? Who's to your child? What about your sister? What about your mom? What about your dad? What about your cousins? What about everybody else that's talking evil about that child's father? Because in my personal story, everybody talked evil about me, like it or not. And at the end, for me, I turned out to be the best father every one of them could ever be. But everybody talked evil about me.
Yeah.
So it is a struggle, and that's what my podcast is about. That's who I am about. That's what I'm a navigate about. I don't get too much into this dating relationship stuff unless you come to me and say, hey, I met this woman, how can I talk? Or I'm going through this. Then we can have those conversations because I know that there's nuance, there's levels. So there's no one blanket answer to anything. I don't blame everything on the white man. I don't blame everything on women. I blame it on socialization and how we're going to get through it. So I always say, think as the individual, not as a group.
Right. No, that's very wise to say, because that's the exact mentality that I have. A lot of people, they talk about success, and I'm going to go on a small tangent real quick here, but success, you got to think about this from a standpoint. If you put race, you put money, you put social status into things, it becomes harder and harder to obtain success because you have all these barriers that you're putting upon yourself. And the thing is, success is done by individual acts and being at the right place, the right time, with a little bit of luck, a little bit of faith. That's how you become successful.
Right.
A lot of people need to understand that it's okay to fail in life. There's been things that I've failed at many times in life, still fail at, but I'm not going to give up, because the thing is, consistency. You're always going to learn from your failures to become better.
Right.
And so a lot of people don't get that. A lot of people, they try to persecute somebody based off of what they believe is the right way. But the funny thing is, you point the finger, there's 10 fingers pointed at you. And a lot of people don't want to think about that, So instead of me looking at like race for me, and this is something that I tell young men or young women, but instead of looking at your race, look at who you are as an individual. Are you a good person? Are you maximizing every bit of your life to become the best person that you can be, regardless of what circumstances are laid out for you?
Right.
Because those who harp on the past, like you said, you're not going to move forward. If I lived in the past, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. It doesn't mean that I don't revisit the past, but I have to tell myself, I'm just revisiting so I never forget where I came from, so I can find the direction that I should be going.